My
I
name is
woke up
Renata
early that
Martinez, and
morning
this
with
is
a
the story of how I
strange
learned
mix
that
of
sometimes the people
optimism
who
and
gave you
dread.
life are the
The
same
snow
ones who
had
try to
barely
erase it.
dusted the sidewalks outside my apartment window, and the chill hadn't yet crept into my bones. The radiator clicked and hummed against the wall, a sound I'd grown to find comforting over the years, like the apartment itself was keeping me company. It was the first Saturday of December in Spokane, Washington, and I had decided, maybe foolishly, maybe desperately, that this would be the year I reached out first. My name is Solara Perez. I'm 31 years old. I'm a single mother. I work at a small community housing nonprofit on the north side of town, doing paperwork and intake and occasionally holding the hands of women who have nowhere left to go. And for the last 8 years, I have been slowly, systematically disappearing from my own family. Not by choice, but by 1,000 quiet decisions that were never mine to make. My father, Estavio Alejandro Perez, is 67, a former carpenter from El Salvador who built half the fences in our neighborhood with his bare hands and who always switched between Spanish and English when something mattered too much for just one language. He once told me over breakfast, when I was maybe 14, that truth only matters when nobody wants it told. I thought he was just being stubborn. It took me almost 20 years to understand that it was a confession disguised as wisdom. A warning from a man who already knew what silence cost but didn't have the courage to pay it. My mother, Narissa, is 64. She is a woman who runs her household the way certain people run courtrooms, with composure, precision, and the quiet understanding that disobedience will be remembered long after the moment passes. My older brother Valen is 35. He married Mariella Mercer 3 years after I had my daughter, and together they became the version of family my mother had always wanted: well-dressed, well-spoken, well-behaved. Everything I apparently was not. And then there's my daughter, Amara, 8 years old, curly hair that refuses to stay in any clip I buy, hazel eyes that notice more than any child should have to. She is the reason I get out of bed on the mornings when nothing else in the world gives me a reason to. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. That Saturday morning, my little girl was curled up on the couch in her pajamas, a cinnamon roll balanced on her knee, and a sketchbook spread open on the armrest. She had that look of total concentration, tongue poking out slightly, curls falling across her forehead. That always made me stop whatever I was doing and just watch her be herself for a moment. She glanced up as I spread a stack of blank holiday cards across the kitchen table. "You're doing Christmas invites?" she asked, half curious, half skeptical, the way only an 8-year-old can pull off. "Yep," I said, trying to sound lighter than I felt. "Going old school this year, handwritten." She tilted her head and brushed her curls back with her wrist. "Even to Grandma and Grandpa?" I hesitated for a beat longer than I should have. "Especially them." She studied me with that quiet, searching look children give you when they sense something you haven't said out loud. Then she went back to her drawing. She added a long, winding scarf to her snowman, a scarf that looked suspiciously like the one I'd given my mother last Christmas, the one I never saw again, not on her neck, not in her closet, not anywhere. I wrote each envelope with careful attention, added little gold stars on the corners, thinking maybe that extra bit of effort would soften something, bring a measure of warmth back to a relationship that had been growing colder every December. But here's the truth I didn't want to face. Not yet. And I need to tell you this part honestly, because if I'm not honest about my own role in what happened, this story is just another tale of a perfect victim, and I was never that. I hadn't attended a family gathering in over 2 years.
The people who
Not
gave you life
entirely
are
because
the
I
same ones
wasn't
who try to
invited.
erase it.
The
Before we
last
dive in,
few
I want to know
times
where
I
are you
showed
watching
up,
from?
I
Have you
left
ever had to
feeling
fight for your
smaller than
place?
when I arrived. A comment from my mother about my situation, a seating arrangement that put me at the edge, a conversation that stopped when I walked into the room. And instead of confronting it, instead of standing in the middle of that kitchen and saying, "Why does it feel like I'm being erased?" I just stopped going. I told myself it was pride, self-respect, independence. But I think part of it was fear. Fear that if I asked the question directly, they'd give me an answer that would break something I couldn't repair. So I stayed away and called it a choice. And they let me because my absence was exactly the story they needed. "See? She doesn't want to be part of this family. She chose to leave. The line between being pushed out and pulling away gets blurry when both things are true. And I had been standing on that blurry line for longer than I cared to admit. After putting my girl down for her nap, I picked up the phone. Calling my mother used to feel like reaching for something warm. Now it felt like approaching a door that might or might not open, and you had to stand there pretending you didn't care either way. "Hello?" Her voice was clipped, not unkind, just efficient. The voice of a woman who scheduled her affection the same way she scheduled her hair appointments, precisely, and only when it fit the calendar. "Hi, Mom. I was wondering if we could plan something for Christmas dinner this year. Maybe at my place. Small and cozy. Just us." A pause. Long enough that I heard the television change channels in the background as though she was doing something else while deciding how much of her attention I deserved. "Oh, that's sweet, Solara, but we've already made arrangements with your brother and Mariella. They're hosting this year. You know how well she organizes things." My fingers pressed into the edge of the counter. "Right, of course. We barely have room at the table this year," she added. "You know how it gets." That sentence, no room, for your own daughter, at a table in the house she grew up in, delivered gently, almost apologetically, but carrying the weight of a door that had been locked from the inside for years. "No problem," I said. "Just wanted to ask. Merry Christmas in advance." "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." The word sweetheart sounded rehearsed, like it had already been used too many times that morning and lost its warmth along the way. I hung up and stood in my quiet kitchen, staring at the phone. Then I looked at the pile of unsent cards. I slid my mother's into the trash, then pulled it out, then set it back on the table. I wasn't ready to give up, but I wasn't brave enough to fight. I was stuck somewhere between hope and evidence, and I'd been living in that in-between space for so long it almost felt like home. That night, after my girl went to bed, I found the annual Perez family newsletter in my email, sent from Mariella's address. Red borders, clip art holly, paragraphs about everyone's accomplishments, the gym expansion, a consulting award, the twins winning science fair medals. Then the line that stopped me cold. "We're thrilled to host the whole family this year at the Perez residence for a very special Christmas Eve." Attached was a PDF guest list, every name I could think of, cousins, neighbors, old friends, even my father's barber. Everyone accounted for, except me, except my daughter. I texted my brother. "Hey, y'all doing Christmas at the house?" He replied a few minutes later. "Yeah, thought you were traveling this year." Traveling. I'd never said that to anyone. Someone invented a reason for my absence, and the entire family accepted it without a single question. That's how thorough the erasure had become. They didn't even need me to leave. They just told everyone I already had. A week later, my phone buzzed with a social media notification. "Narissa Perez tagged you in a photo." My heart jumped. Maybe she was trying this year. The photo loaded. The living room I grew up in. White lights around the windows. Everyone gathered at the fireplace, my brother with a wine glass, Mariella mid-laugh, the twins buried in wrapping paper, my parents at the center, beaming. The caption, "My whole world in one frame, #family is everything." 10 people tagged. None of them were us. The notification was a glitch, facial recognition flagging an old album photo. She hadn't thought of me at all. The algorithm had more awareness of my existence than my own mother. That night, I searched for an old family picture from 5 years ago, the last Christmas I actually attended. Matching pajamas, my arm around my girl, my father holding a glass too close to the tree. The photo was gone, deleted from their accounts without ceremony. That weekend, my best friend Della Whitmore, 34, legal administrator at the Spokane City Courthouse, and the kind of friend who gives you honesty when everyone else gives you comfort, invited me to a community fundraiser dinner. At the hotel ballroom, I spotted my mother near the buffet, Mariella beside her chatting with the event coordinator like she was running the show. An elderly woman called across the room. "Narissa, is your daughter here tonight?" I looked up instinctively. My
My
mother
name is
placed her
Renata
hand on
Martinez, and this is
Mariella's
the story of
shoulder
how I
and
learned that
smiled.
sometimes the people who gave
"Yes,
you life are the
both
same
of my
ones
kids are
who
here
try to erase
tonight."
it.
I didn't gasp, didn't flinch. I sat perfectly still while something inside me went quiet. The kind of quiet that settles when a suspicion you've carried for years finally becomes a fact you can no longer deny. Della touched my wrist under the table. I excused myself and walked to the restroom. In the mirror, the woman staring back wasn't surprised. She'd been expecting this for a very long time. And that was the worst part. When I returned, I caught Mariella's eyes from across the room. She wasn't smiling, wasn't gloating. Her expression held something I couldn't quite read. Not pity, not triumph. Something like recognition. Like she understood exactly what had just happened because she'd been in a version of that position before she learned to play by my mother's rules. I filed that look away without knowing why. I would understand it much later. That night, I texted my brother about what our mother had said. His answer: she was just being polite. Don't read into it. Della was different. Stop waiting for them to change, she said. The question isn't whether they love you, it's how long you'll accept this version of love. Then she paused and added more quietly, and be honest about your part, Solution. You disappeared for 2 years. It doesn't make what they're doing right, but it handed them exactly the narrative they needed. She was right. I knew it in my bones. The church holiday fundraiser the following week. My place card, table 8, far corner near the stage speakers, half-sized chairs, glitter glue decorations, name tags, Liam, Sophia, Zane, and Solara. The children's table. Why do you have the tiny chair, Mommy? My girl asked. They ran out of big ones, I said. Didn't they know you were coming? I guess not. I folded my legs onto the small plastic seat, and while I sat there, laughing with the children, passing napkins, complimenting glitter masterpieces, my mind drifted to the winter before. After my father's second stroke. The hospital at 3 in the morning. I was the one beside him when his heart monitor beeped too fast and he gripped my wrist like he was falling. I brought soup, changed his socks, held his hand in the dark while he mumbled my name, begging me not to leave. I stayed until morning. When my mother and brother arrived the next day, she kissed his forehead and announced, "We've been here all night, Daddy." I sat in the corner wearing yesterday's clothes and said nothing, not out of grace, but because I realized they had simply edited me out of their version of events and moved on without missing a beat. As the fundraiser ended, Mariella whispered near the coat rack, "Thanks for handling the kids' table. You're always so adaptable." Not entirely mocking. There was something underneath, a challenge without a question mark. How much longer will you keep accepting this? That night, I photographed my place card, the seating chart, uploaded both to a private folder, Ledger, 10 days before Christmas. My girl looked up from wrapping presents and asked, "Do you think Grandma will send me something this year?" "I'm not sure, sweetie. She didn't last year, or the year before." Not sad, just factual. An 8-year-old cataloging the years she wasn't remembered with the same calm she used to count crayons. At her school winter concert, her teacher, Mrs. Bowman, showed me a drawing. A family tree, colorful and crooked, missing 2 people. I asked if she forgot her grandparents. The teacher said gently. She said, "I don't think they like me much." At a craft fair days later, my girl found her cousin Lena by the cookies. "Did Grandma send you anything yet?" Lena held up a brand new phone. "Early Christmas gift." My daughter blinked. "She never sends me anything. Why?" Mariella, arms crossed nearby, answered smoothly. "She probably forgot. You live far away, sweetie." We lived 15 minutes apart. I took my daughter's hand and left without a word. They weren't just erasing me anymore. They were rewriting her story, too. The next afternoon, I tried my old house key. It didn't turn. Mariella opened the door with a tight expression. We changed the locks after the refinance. Security. She took my cookies but didn't invite me inside. Della checked public property records the next morning. Her job at City Hall gave her legal access. The house had been transferred to Mariella's sole ownership 6 months ago. My childhood home, the tile I helped grout, the fence I painted sage green at 12 because my father let me pick the color. "They didn't forget you," Della said. "They just didn't include you." Inside the house, my graduation photo was gone. "Simplifying," my mother said. "Clutter." But the new gallery wall held my brother, Mariella, and the twins in gold frames. No trace of me. Was I always this disposable? I asked, or did I do something to earn it? My father looked up from his phone. His hand trembled on the armrest. Something moved behind his eyes. Guilt, exhaustion, or the anguish of a man who knows what's happening is wrong but has run out of the strength to stop it. My mother set down her glass. You've always lived on your own terms. We assumed you didn't want to be part of the family way. I didn't opt out, I said. You closed the door before I could knock. Silence. But my father's hand kept trembling. That night, my girl asked, "Was that ever your house, Mommy?" It was supposed to be, until someone decided I didn't belong in it anymore. She rested her head on my shoulder. After she fell asleep, I opened the ledger and typed a new entry. Asset reassignment. The locks changed, the pictures vanished, but I had nothing left to lose now, and that meant I had nothing left keeping me quiet. Christmas Eve arrived the way winter always does in Spokane, beautiful on the surface, brutal underneath. The city was buried in white, and the snow made everything look gentle until you stepped into it and felt how cold the world actually was. My girl had picked her dress the night before, red velvet with a ribbon I'd sewn back on at midnight because she wanted it perfect. She'd spent 40 minutes that morning making a card for my father, 2 figures standing under a cartoon Christmas tree, "Love you, Grandpa," in shaky glitter pen, each letter pressed so hard the pen nearly tore through the paper. She held it up for my approval with both hands like it was a diploma. "Think he'll like it?" she asked. "He'll love it," I said. I loaded the car with small gift bags, a crossword book, a tea sampler, a burgundy wool scarf. Nothing expensive, but carefully chosen. The kind of gifts you give when you still believe the act of giving carries its own dignity, regardless of whether anyone on the other end cares enough to notice. I rehearsed my line the entire drive across town. Just thought we'd drop by for a minute. Harmless. Casual. Non-confrontational. Because this wasn't about being welcomed anymore. This was about something harder and more personal than that. It was about refusing to vanish without at least standing in the doorway long enough to be seen. Halfway there, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from my mother. "So sorry, car battery died, won't make it tonight." That was it. 7 words. No warmth, no detail, no follow-up. Then Della texted, "Thought you should see this." Attached was a screenshot. Mariella's Instagram story, posted 1 hour earlier. The house blazing with lights. My mother holding a glass of wine. My father by the tree, unwrapping a gift. Everyone present. Everyone smiling. Everyone exactly where they wanted to be. The caption, "Cozy Christmas vibes with the full crew." I looked at the screenshot. Then I looked in the rearview mirror. My daughter was smoothing the glitter on her card with her thumb, making sure every letter sparkled. She caught my eye and smiled. I kept driving. The snow crunched under our boots as we walked up the front steps. Through the frosted window, I could see the living room, the tree, the stockings on the mantel, shadows of people moving past plates and wrapping paper, everything warm and golden and alive. Everything I used to belong to, visible through glass I couldn't pass through. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. The door opened. My father stood in the frame, and the first thing I noticed was how much smaller he looked. Not just physically, though that too. Something inside him seemed compressed, folded in on itself, like a man who'd been carrying a weight so long his body had started to reshape around it. Behind him, music, laughter, voices I recognized but hadn't heard directed at me in a very long time. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice low, strained, barely above a whisper. His eyes moved to my daughter, and something in them flickered. Pain, recognition, regret, before settling back on me. "We just wanted to say hello, Dad." He didn't step aside. He didn't open the door wider. He stood there, half in shadow and half in the warm light of the house I grew up in, and said, "We already told you, Solara. You're not part of this family anymore. But here is the part I need you to understand. The part that changed everything I thought I knew about that night." His eyes didn't agree with his mouth. Something fractured behind them, slowly, the way a branch splits under snow it was never meant to hold. These were not his words. I could feel it in my chest, the way you feel a lie, even when it's spoken clearly. Someone behind him, someone I could not see but could sense the way you sense a hand pulling strings in a dark room, had written this script for him. My girl stepped forward, holding her card out with both hands. I made this for you, Grandpa. He looked down at it. His jaw tightened. His eyes turned red and wet. His hand moved toward the card, a small, involuntary motion, the kind the body makes before the mind overrides it, and then stopped. For one terrible, suspended second, I thought he might take it. I thought the man I remembered might push through whatever wall had been built around him and reach for his granddaughter's outstretched hands. Then Mariella appeared behind him, one hand on the doorframe, and the moment collapsed. "Didn't you get the message?" she said. The voice was light. The edges were not. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I placed the gift bags on the porch, took my daughter's hand, and said, "Merry Christmas to all." We walked back to the car through the snow. As I buckled her in, she looked up at me and asked, "Did we do something wrong, Mommy?" I looked into her eyes, the same hazel I saw in my own reflection every morning, and said the only honest thing I could manage, "No, baby, we just showed up where truth wasn't welcome." The drive home was quiet, not the kind of quiet that's empty, the kind that's heavy, the kind that settles over you when something has ended, not with a shout, not with a slam, but with a door closing so softly you almost miss the sound of it latching shut. After she fell asleep, still holding her unstamped card and her stuffed llama, I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, palms flat on the cold tile. I didn't cry. I wanted to. The pressure behind my eyes was enormous, like a dam holding back something it was never built to contain. But my body refused to release it. Some part of me understood that if I fell apart on that floor, I might not reassemble in time for morning, and she needed me in the morning. So I sat there, dry-eyed and rigid and holding everything. I posted one photo to my private page, no faces, just the gift bags sitting on the snowy porch, untouched, with a single sentence. We weren't excluded. We were intentionally erased. The inbox filled within minutes. Not from family, from the margins. "Are you okay?" I had no idea. "That's not right." Close to midnight, one more message. Unknown number. "If you keep making this public, you'll regret it." I stared at it for a moment. Then I took a screenshot, saved the number, and whispered to the dark apartment, "Let them come." Christmas morning was the quietest morning of my life. No calls, no texts, not a single emoji from anyone who shared my last name. My girl stood on her kitchen step stool, buttering toast with the grave concentration of a surgeon. She handed me a slice and said, "Merry Christmas, Mommy." Nothing more. No questions about Grandma. No mention of gifts that didn't arrive. This was the first Christmas I wasn't waiting for them to change. Della sent a PDF that afternoon. Perez Family Trust, amended. My name was gone. Every asset redirected to my brother and Mariella. Clause 4B, hit like a verdict written by people who had confused control with justice. Given her history of independence and detachment from core family functions, Solara Perez is to be considered self-reliant and is therefore not included in future distributions. They had taken every year I stayed away, every Christmas I spent alone because showing up hurt too much, and turned it into legal evidence of my own irrelevance. My silence, chosen because speaking felt pointless, had become the weapon they used to erase me on paper. Then another email, this time from Mariella to relatives. "Here's the finalized trust. Please disregard the earlier draft, the one where Solara was listed. That version was outdated." My name was still on the CC line. They didn't even notice they'd included me in the announcement of my own exclusion. That afternoon, a package arrived. No return label. Inside, the cashmere scarf I'd hand-knitted for my mother, cream-colored. Hours of work. A pattern I chose because it reminded me of the lace she used to wear to Christmas services, back when I still believed the woman in the pew and the woman in the kitchen were the same person. The scarf was untouched, still folded, a yellow sticky note taped to the front. "Doesn't match the living room palette. Maybe you can use it instead." Then Della forwarded another screenshot. Mariella's Instagram. Their golden retriever Charlie wrapped in the patchwork quilt I'd hand-stitched as a gift the Christmas before. 2 months of work. Evenings at the sewing machine while my girl slept. Caption: Charlie loves his new throne. #luxury pup. My mother's comment: looks better on him than on the couch. I stared at that comment for a very long time. That quilt was supposed to mean something. Every square was measured, chosen, sewn with the kind of attention you give to things you hope will be loved. But in their hands, even warmth became a punchline. That evening, I tried to open Netflix for our annual tradition. Silly holiday movie, popcorn, marshmallows stuck to everything. The screen: access denied, credentials updated. I texted Mariella. Her reply: we're streamlining household users, hope you understand. Della discovered I had been auto-billed for the family plan for 3 years. They kept my payment but removed my access. I canceled the subscription and sent one final message to the family group chat. The thread where my last message, a photo of my daughter's art project with a warm holiday greeting, had been answered with nothing but 2 blue check marks and weeks of silence. To whom it may concern, this is my final act of invisible generosity. May your streaming continue uninterrupted. No one replied, but that silence was mine now. Between Christmas and New Year's, Della called with the last piece. Bad news or worse? Worse. Your name is tied to a co-signed gym contract. A franchise your brother ran 3 years ago. It defaulted. 2 outstanding invoices flagged under your credit. Contact person listed: Mariella. This wasn't exclusion anymore. This was financial fraud wearing my name. Within an hour, I sat across from Raymond Torres, a family attorney in a small, thorough firm on the north side of town. I laid everything on his desk: the will, the trust, the emails, the gym debt. Do I have grounds? Financial fraud? Identity misuse? Technically, yes. But it depends on what you want. Vengeance or distance. I want them to stop using my silence as permission. That night, after sending the documents to Torres, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel relieved. I felt something I hadn't expected, something that had been waiting beneath the anger for years, patient and unbearable. I stood in front of the hallway mirror, the one with the gold trim my father picked out at a flea market when I was 17, and I looked at myself. Not a glance. A real look. And for the first time in this entire ordeal, I didn't think about what they had done to me. I thought about what I had done to myself. I remembered every time I didn't show up, not because I was forbidden, but because I was wounded. My father's 65th birthday. I was invited, but I didn't go because my mother hadn't called for my daughter's birthday the week before. Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I canceled because my brother didn't return my text. Easter the year before that. I stayed home because no one asked what I was bringing, and I decided that meant I wasn't wanted. Every single time I called it dignity, self-preservation. But standing in that mirror, I finally saw what I had been refusing to see. I had built a fortress out of my pain and called it independence. And every stone I laid gave them another reason to say, she chose this. She left. We didn't push her. She walked away. They were wrong to exclude me. Absolutely, fundamentally wrong. But I was also wrong to believe that silence was the same thing as strength. Withdrawing wasn't protecting myself. It was abandoning the fight before it started and then wondering why no one came looking for me. They closed the door, I whispered to my reflection, but I stopped knocking a long time ago. And then, for the first time in this entire story, I cried. Not because my family rejected me, but because I realized how thoroughly I had let the pain harden me into the most closed-off, unreachable version of myself. The version that never asked for help, never showed vulnerability, never gave anyone the chance to disappoint her because she never gave them any chance at all. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, opened my laptop, and for the first time, I didn't write to collect evidence. I wrote to tell the truth. The first line: what they did was wrong, but my silence allowed the story to be written without anyone to challenge it. This wasn't forgiveness. This was something harder: honesty about my own role in my own erasure. and it made me stronger than any folder of screenshots ever could. Then I opened a second document and wrote what needed to be sent. To Mariella Mercer Perez and Valen Perez, you are hereby notified that if my name appears again in financial contracts, legal documentation, rumor, or insult, you will receive notice from my legal representation, not from the family phone tree. This isn't about revenge, it's about boundaries, and I have finally drawn mine. Signed, sent. No red receipt needed. December 26th began with a knock I wasn't expecting. Della stood on my doorstep, snow on her coat, holding a manila folder against her chest. Not casually, but carefully, the way you carry something that weighs more than paper should. She stepped inside, set the folder on the kitchen counter between a cold cup of coffee and a crayon my daughter had left behind, and said, I finally got it released from the attorney's archive. Your mother had it blocked. She contacted Torres's office directly and told them not to deliver it. Deliver what? Open it. Inside, wrapped in legal parchment that smelled like old filing cabinets and other people's decades, was a letter. Not typed, handwritten. My father's name at the bottom in faded blue ink. The cheap ballpoint he always used because he said cheap pens were the only honest ones. I tried to get this to you months ago, Della said quietly. Your mother told Torres it would inflame tensions. Those were her exact words. The handwriting was shakier than I remembered, more frail, more hesitant, but unmistakably his. The way he curved his capital letters like small acts of defiance against straight lines, the way he pressed too hard on certain words, as if the pen itself needed to feel the urgency. I learned to write by tracing those letter shapes at the kitchen table when I was 6 years old, his big hand guiding my small one through the alphabet. The letter opened with a line that read like it had been carried for years, waiting for the right moment to be set down. I failed you, Solara. I saw what was happening and I did nothing. I sat down. Not by choice. My legs made the decision before my mind could argue. He was specific. He named the Christmas Eve 3 years ago when my mother told him not to call me. He named the hospital night, confirmed that I was the one who sat with him through the darkest hours after his stroke, confirmed that I held his hand and changed his socks and stayed until morning, confirmed that my mother lied when she arrived and announced they'd been there all night. He called me the only one who ever showed up when it wasn't convenient. He wrote about watching my photos disappear from the hallway wall and saying nothing, about hearing my mother introduce Mariella as her daughter to strangers and swallowing the correction that sat on his tongue like a stone he couldn't spit out, about the holiday newsletter that didn't include my name, and how he'd stared at it on the screen for 20 minutes before closing his laptop and going to bed without speaking a word. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but peace that requires your daughter's erasure isn't peace. It's a contract I never should have signed, and I signed it every day by doing nothing. Then came the paragraph that changed everything. I've asked my old attorney, Raymond Torres, to prepare something separate for you, apart from the main trust. Your mother controls too much of the process, and I can't fight her directly anymore. My body won't allow it, but I can make sure you aren't erased completely. You deserve more than what I had the courage to give you while I was strong enough to stand. I'm sorry it took me this long to put it on paper. Some men spend their whole lives learning how to say what matters. I almost ran out of time. He signed it, Estavio Alejandro Perez, in ink that had faded at the edges, as though the letter had been folded and unfolded many times before being sealed for good. The date was nearly a year old. 12 months. For an entire year, this letter existed in an attorney's filing cabinet, while I spent every one of those months believing my father had sided with my mother, that he had let me go willingly. He hadn't. He had been too physically weak to confront my mother head-on, and too ashamed to face me with a truth that required admitting he'd failed the one person he claimed to love most. Della pulled out a second document from the folder, a photocopy of a handwritten note, not from my father this time, but from my mother. Her penmanship was unmistakable, sharp, deliberate, precise. Sent to Torres's office. Do not deliver this to Solara. The letter will only create more drama. I am doing what is best for this family. I read it 3 times. First with a fury so bright it nearly blinded me. then with a grief that settled in my chest like something made of iron, then, on the third reading, with something I didn't expect: understanding. My mother was not a monster. Monsters know what they are. She was something more complicated and in many ways more dangerous. A woman so consumed by the need to control her family's image that she had confused obedience with love, silence with loyalty, and compliance with closeness. In her mind, I was the flaw in the photograph. The daughter who got pregnant at 19 and refused to be ashamed. The daughter who chose independence over submission. The daughter who walked away instead of kneeling. Cutting me out wasn't cruelty to her. It was correction. The way a gardener prunes a branch that grows in the wrong direction, not out of hatred but out of devotion to the shape of the tree as seen from the street. She wanted a perfect family. I was the part that didn't fit the frame. And her note to Torres, "I am doing what is best for this family," wasn't a lie. She believed it, completely. And that belief is exactly what made her capable of doing what she did without ever once considering that she might be wrong. The people who cause the deepest damage are never the ones who know they're being cruel. They're the ones who are absolutely certain they're being kind. New Year's Eve. My girl was drawing at the coffee table, a house with no doors, just windows, and two figures standing outside holding hands. She didn't explain it. She didn't need to. That evening, my phone buzzed. Anonymous Gmail. Subject: Trust Addendum. You should know. 3 sentences. I'm sending this because someone should. Wait until you see what else they've changed. Don't ask who this is. Attached were scanned documents, a second amendment to the trust I hadn't seen before, plus a chain of internal emails between my mother and Mariella, discussing in clinical detail the logistics of removing my name from every financial and legal document connected to the Perez family. Reading those emails was like watching the blueprints of your own demolition laid out in someone else's neat handwriting, but buried in the chain, almost an afterthought, almost invisible, was a more recent exchange. 3 weeks old. My mother, writing to my brother, "Mariella has been spending beyond what we agreed. I think we need to revisit her authority over the estate accounts. She's been making decisions without consulting me. Perhaps it's time to restructure her access." I read it twice, and then I understood who had sent the anonymous email. It was Mariella, not because she'd suddenly grown a conscience, not because guilt had found her mailing address, but because the same machine she'd helped build, the quiet tightening, the financial control, the whispered conversations behind closed doors, had begun turning its gears toward her. My mother was doing to Mariella what she had spent years doing to me, questioning loyalty, restricting access, laying the groundwork for the next exclusion. Mariella sent me those documents because she needed a shield. If I launched a legal challenge, my mother's attention would shift to me, away from Mariella. I was being offered not an alliance, but a position in someone else's survival strategy. I had a choice. I could use everything she sent, every internal email, every financial discussion, every piece of evidence showing how the machine worked from the inside, and bring the whole structure crashing down. It would destroy Mariella along with it. I chose not to. I took only what was mine. My father's addendum, the gym debt records, the original will showing my name before it was deleted, his letter, my mother's note blocking it. I didn't need Mariella's war. I needed my own truth, and truth, unlike revenge, doesn't require burning down other people's houses to light your way. I texted my mother, "We can talk if you're ready to be honest." The system responded instantly, "This user has blocked you." I stared at the screen, and then I laughed, a short, unexpected sound in the quiet apartment. Not from pain, from recognition, from the sudden clarity that comes when someone's final act tells you everything their words never did. That was her punctuation mark, and I didn't need anything more from a woman whose last communication was making sure I couldn't reach her. The next morning, I took my girl to the old bookstore on Monroe Street, the one with the creaky floors, the bell above the door that always rang a half-second late, and the owner named Walt who smelled like peppermint and greeted every customer like they'd been missed. My father used to bring me here on my birthdays. We'd browse for an hour, and he'd always let me pick 2 books instead of 1. then pretend to be irritated about the extra weight the whole walk home. It was the only place where he was entirely himself, not my mother's husband, not my brother's enabler, just a man who loved stories and the daughter who loved them too. My girl pulled a book from the shelf about a girl who built a treehouse after her family moved away, a story about building something new in a place you choose for yourself. She held it up with both hands. This one. Outside, the January air was sharp enough to taste. She asked the question she'd been holding. Do you think they'll miss us someday? Calm, curious, not sad. Like she already understood what I was still learning, that missing someone isn't the same as deserving them. That's not ours to carry anymore, I said. She nodded once, satisfied, and skipped ahead through the snow. At home, we gathered every gift that never reached its destination. Ornaments, books, the candle set still in silver foil. We drove to a women's shelter on the south side of town and donated every single item. My girl carried the bags inside herself, walking through the door with that quiet seriousness children reserve for things they know are important. That night, 3 candles by the window, one for memory, one for letting go, one for whatever comes next. First Tuesday of January. Raymond Torres sat across from me in his small office. Charcoal suit, gold cufflinks, the kind posture of a man who'd spent 40 years watching families dissolve in conference rooms and had somehow kept his faith that the law could still protect the people it was supposed to protect. I want you to know, he said, sliding a sealed folder across his desk. This clause wasn't typical. Handwritten addendums outside the primary trust structure are unusual. But this one is valid. Dated, witnessed, notarized. Your father came to this office 8 months ago. He sat in the same chair you're sitting in right now. He could barely hold the pen, but he wrote every word himself. Torres paused and his voice softened slightly. He told me, if I can't protect her while I'm alive, I'll protect her when I'm gone. Inside the folder, a handwritten legal addendum granting me partial access to the assessed value of the family home, the house where my photos were taken down, the house where my key was made useless, the house where every trace of me had been removed as though I'd never existed inside its walls. He couldn't undo everything your mother did, Torres said, but he carved out this piece, independently filed, separately witnessed, because he knew they would never give you anything willingly. Then he handed me a flash drive, small, black, unremarkable. He recorded this the same day he signed the addendum, same chair, asked me to hold it until the right time. That night, after my girl fell asleep with her new book open on her chest and a crayon still loosely in her hand, I sat at the kitchen table and plugged in the flash drive. There he was, thinner than I remembered, older by years that seemed to have arrived all at once, a tremor in his hands that he tried to still by folding them on his lap, but his voice was steady, the same voice that used to read me bedtime stories in 2 languages because he said some feelings only make sense in the language they were born in. I let them decide you didn't belong, he said, looking directly into the camera, and I regret it every single day I've had since. He named them, my mother, Mariella, not with venom, but without the shield he had held over them for years. He said he knew the quilt I made had been given to the dog. He said he knew the trust was rewritten while he was recovering from his stroke, that Mariella handled the paperwork and my mother approved it and no one asked his opinion because by then his opinion had become optional. He said he saw the group chat messages, the holiday plans, the memes, the cousin who posted only real family this year, and he stayed silent because staying silent was easier than being brave. I told myself silence was wisdom, he said, that staying neutral was the same as being fair. But neutrality in the face of what they did to you isn't wisdom, it's permission, and I gave them permission to erase my daughter while I sat in the same room and watched. He paused, adjusted his glasses with a shaking hand, then said the words that undid me completely. You were always the heart of this family, Solara, the one who showed up at 3 in the morning, the one who made quilts for people who didn't deserve the time it took to thread the needle. I don't expect this to fix anything. Some things don't get fixed, they just get understood. But I hope this gives you back what they took. Not the money, not the house. the knowledge that your father saw you, even when he was too afraid to say so. I watched it twice. Then I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, listening to my daughter's breathing in the next room, slow, steady, unbothered by everything that kept me awake. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not vindication. Release. The kind that doesn't come from winning. The kind that comes from being seen by the person whose blindness hurt the most. The next morning, I sent the video and the supporting documents to my notary, then to Torres for official filing. Then, quietly, without announcement, to Tia Rosalinda Fuentes in Portland, my father's older sister, the woman my mother had made unwelcome in her own brother's home for years because she refused to pretend the family was as perfect as the Christmas photos suggested. I sent the formal cease and desist to my mother and Mariella with the addendum, the gym debt, and the video attached. Mariella texted 10 minutes later. "You think this changes anything?" I sent one line back. "It already has." I didn't post anything publicly. Truth doesn't need amplification, it just needs an opening. The messages arrived through the day and into the evening, slowly at first, then with the quiet momentum of something that had been waiting to move for a very long time. A distant cousin. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. We never knew." An old friend of my father's. "I always wondered what happened between you all. Now I know it wasn't you." A neighbor from the old street. "Your mother told everyone you moved away." And then, late that night, a message from Tia Rosalinda, written in a mix of English and Spanish, the way my father always spoke when the feeling was too large for one language alone. "Mi niña, I've seen this for a long time, longer than you know. Your father told me once that you were the only one in that house who loved without conditions. He said it like he was confessing something he was ashamed of, not ashamed of you, but of himself for not protecting you. You were always the best of him. Don't let them make you forget that." My brother called the next day, first time in months. He didn't apologize, didn't mention the video. He asked one question. "You really had to do all that? You really have to ask?" A long silence. He hung up. I didn't call back. I didn't hate him. I just felt sad for a man who chose the easiest path and would have to live with that choice long after the ease ran out. I took a portion of the settlement and opened a college savings account in my daughter's name. I typed the label myself. From Abuelo Estavio. The rest I donated to a transitional shelter for women estranged from their families. I made the donation in my mother's name. The receipt arrived a week later, addressed to Ms. Nerissa Perez, in honor of those no longer invisible. That Saturday, my girl and I drove to the old house one last time. She held my hand as we stood on the sidewalk across the street, looking at it the way you look at a place that shaped you but can no longer hold you. I didn't go inside. I didn't walk up the steps. I just stood there in the cold January light and looked at the porch where I drew with chalk on summer mornings, the upstairs window where I read books during thunderstorms. The fence I painted sage green at 12 because my father let me pick the color and then told me it was the best choice anyone in the family had ever made. "I didn't lose a family," I said, mostly to myself. "I lost a frame that no longer fit the picture." "That's kind of pretty, Mommy." "Thank you, baby." "Can we get hot chocolate on the way home?" "Absolutely." She let go of my hand and skipped ahead through the snow, humming a song I didn't recognize. Something she must have learned at school, something that belonged entirely to her, something new. That night, she taped a lopsided paper snowflake to the window, stepped back to admire it, and turned to me with the kind of earnestness that makes you believe the world might still have some goodness left in it. "We can make our own traditions, right, Mommy?" "Yes," I said, "we already are." She smiled, the full, gap-toothed, uncomplicated smile that I would protect with every breath I had left in my body, and went back to her markers. I sat on the couch with a cup of tea going cold in my hands. The apartment was quiet, not the heavy silence of loss or absence, but the gentle silence of sufficiency, of enough. My phone buzzed one final time. A voicemail notification. My mother's number. The first voicemail she had ever left me in 31 years of being her daughter. I looked at the screen, held my finger over the play button, felt the pull of every word she might have said, Every apology she might have offered, every acknowledgement she might have managed, every version of I was wrong or I'm sorry or even just I miss you that might or might not be waiting inside that tiny recording. Or maybe it was another dismissal, another excuse, another carefully worded sentence designed to make me feel like the problem was mine. I sat with it for a long moment, long enough to feel the old gravity, the pull that had kept me orbiting a family that never orbited back, long enough to recognize it for what it was, not love, but habit, not connection, but the ghost of one. Then I pressed delete, not because I was angry, not because I wanted her to feel what I'd felt, but because I already had everything I came for, the truth, the letter, the video, my father's last quiet act of love, hidden in a filing cabinet for a year by a woman who thought she was protecting her family by dismantling it. My daughter, my friend, myself, imperfect, scarred in places I was still discovering, still learning how to stand in rooms without apologizing for the space I took up, but no longer willing to shrink to fit inside someone else's definition of who I was allowed to be. On the refrigerator, held by a sunflower magnet, was my daughter's family tree from school. 3 names written in purple crayon, each letter pressed with the full conviction of a child who has stopped questioning her own reality. Amara, Solara, Della. When her teacher asked why only 3 names, my girl looked up from her desk and said, "Family is who shows up when no one else does." I framed it, hung it in the hallway, in the spot where the mirror used to be. The gold-trimmed mirror where I'd whispered confessions to my own reflection, where I'd finally admitted that I wasn't only a victim of their silence, but also a prisoner of my own. The mirror was in the closet now, not thrown away. Just put aside. Some things you keep not because you need them, but because they remind you of the person you were before you became the person you are. I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, pulled the blanket to my chin, and listened to the snow falling outside the window, steady and soft, covering the world in white the way time covers old wounds. Not erasing them, just making them something you can carry without it breaking you. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time in my entire adult life, there was no anger beneath my ribs, no rehearsal of tomorrow's argument. No imaginary conversation with people who were never going to hear me no matter how clearly or loudly or carefully I spoke. Just stillness. The kind you don't inherit or stumble into. The kind you earn. They wanted me silent. They built an entire architecture of exclusion designed to make me disappear. From the photographs, from the will, from the holiday table, from the family name itself. And for years, I cooperated. I called retreat dignity. I called isolation independence. I let them write my absence into their story because I was too proud to fight for a seat I believed I shouldn't have to ask for. But silence and peace are 2 very different things. One is a cage you build around yourself and call it safety. The other is a door you walk through when you're finally ready to stop performing for people who were never watching. I found the second one,